Will Deion Sanders dictate where his son, Shedeur Sanders, ends up at the next level? Welcome back, guys. This is Dave Syvertsen from Our Lad Scouting, and without a doubt, one of the most interesting storylines to follow between now and the 2025 NFL Draft is Shedeur Sanders. Where is he going to end up? How high is he going to go? Opinions on him are all over the place. But before we even get there, Deion Sanders was recently asked by Keyshawn Johnson in an interview how much power, how much say will he have in terms of where Shedeur will end up at the next level, a la Archie Manning with his son Eli back in 2004. If you remember back then, he said no to the Chargers and he kind of forced his way in a trade to the New York Giants. Will Deion have that kind of pull? He did say he'll handle things privately.
Will you step in and do some of that if it's the wrong organization and say he ain't going there?
Yeah, but I'm not going to do it publicly. I'll do it privately.
Yeah.
But he did say a few things in his response that caught my attention. He came out with 4 kind of prerequisites, if you will, for an organization that wants to draft his son. Here they are. Number 1, that organization needs to have experience handling a quarterback from the start of his career. Number 2, have someone in the building that understands what they are doing, to quote him, when it comes to developing a quarterback. Number 3 is have the support within the infrastructure of the organization. And number 4, understand the true direction and the vision of that franchise. Now, that's a little gray. It's a little subjective. But what this tells me is that there needs to be complete cohesion from ownership to the front office, to the coaching staff, and maybe even in some places to the surrounding personnel. That's where Deion wants his son to end up. This will be the first time Deion is not coaching Shedeur Sanders. He has coached him at high school and college at 2 different stops. So he is going to try to pull his way and use his power as much as he can to dictate. So I came up with 4 to 5 teams that are likely going to be picking in the top 10 in next April's draft. And I want to objectively compare these situations, looking at some historical data from all levels, ownership, front office, and coaching, and maybe find where I think the best fit will be in terms of what Deion outlined. Let's start off with the Tennessee Titans. The last 3 first-round quarterbacks this ownership group has taken, and the record with the team is Marcus Mariota, who went 29-32, Jake Locker, who went 9-14, and Vince Young, who went 30-17. The last 3 quarterback draft picks taken by Ron Carthon, Will Levis in 2023, who was a second rounder. And then when he was with San Francisco as a director of personnel, he was a part of that group that took Brock Purdy in 2022 in round 7 and Trey Lance in 2021 in the first round. The last 4 starting quarterbacks that have worked under head coach Brian Callahan, Joe Burrow, when Callahan was the offensive coordinator in Cincinnati, along with Andy Dalton, where he was also the offensive coordinator with. He was with Derek Carr as a quarterback's coach, and he was also worked with Matthew Stafford as a quarterback coach. Pretty impressive list of quarterbacks there. Let's move on to the New York Giants. The last 3 first-round quarterbacks this ownership group has taken. 2019, Daniel Jones. We don't know how that ended up. In 2004, Eli Manning, who finished with a 117-117 record, 2 Super Bowl wins though. And 1979, it was Phil Simms, who went 95-64 as a starter. Now, the last 3 quarterback draft picks taken by general manager Joe Shane, he was with Buffalo the last time they took quarterbacks the organization he worked for took a quarterback. Jake Fromm in 2020, who was a 5th rounder. Josh Allen in 2018 as a 1st rounder. And Nathan Peterman back in 2017 as a 5th rounder. In all of those drafts, Shane was the assistant general manager. The last 4 starting quarterbacks that have worked under Brian Daboll, a head coach. A lot of people say he's a QB whisperer. Okay, Daniel Jones, we know how that worked out. Josh Allen, we know how that has panned out with and without Daboll in town. Matt Castle, who was Brian Daboll was an offensive coordinator for, and Matt Moore, who he was also an offensive coordinator for. Let's move on and compare the Las Vegas Raiders situation. The last 3 first-round quarterbacks under this ownership, Jamarcus Russell in 2007, number 1 overall. He went 7-18. In 1991, Todd Marinovich, who went 3-5 as a starter. And in 1980, Mark Wilson, who went 31-19. This ownership has not spent a lot of first-round picks at the quarterback position. Now, let's move over to general manager Tom Telesco. Here are the last 3 quarterbacks that he chose, and this was when he was with division rival Los Angeles Chargers. Matt Dugan, 2022, 7th-round pick. Justin Herbert, 2020, round 1 as a GM. And Easton Stick in 2019 in the 5th round as the GM. Now, Antonio Pierce is the head coach for the Las Vegas Raiders. I would put money on the fact that he will not be there. But just for the sake of the comparison, he has worked with Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell as an interim head coach. But I think this is a situation where we're going to have to add this piece of the puzzle to this comparison in another month or 2 when the Raiders hire their next head coach. Now, the Carolina Panthers, let's throw them into this mix, even though Bryce Young is currently playing better. Bryce Young is the only quarterback this ownership group has taken, and as a starter, and he is updating this right now. I believe he is 5-18 as a starter. The last 3 quarterbacks taken by general manager Dan Morgan, Bryce Young as an assistant GM, Matt Corral taken as an assistant GM, and Jake Fromm, 2020 round 5 director of pro personnel when he was with Buffalo. So the last 4 starting quarterbacks under head coach Dave Canales was obviously Bryce Young and Andy Dalton this year, but Baker Mayfield, he was part of that big turnaround project in Tampa Bay last season, and he's worked with Russell Wilson as an offensive coordinator in Seattle. The last team that is on this list are the New Orleans Saints. The last 3 first-round quarterbacks under this ownership group is nobody. They've never taken a first-round quarterback, this ownership group in New Orleans. The last 3 quarterback draft picks taken by general manager Mickey Loomis, Spencer Rattler in 2024 as a 5th rounder, Jake Haener in round 4 in 2023, and Ian Book in 2021 in round 4. Essentially, this team was run by Drew Brees and Sean Payton for so long that just didn't have to put a lot of attention into drafting starting caliber quarterbacks. So this is a big question mark under Loomis's career and his capabilities. Head coach Dennis Allen was fired this year, so they can't really be a part of this comparison as well in this regard. We're going to have to, again, wait and see who is going to be hired in New Orleans and kind of compare them at that point. So those are the teams I'm really comparing together, and where do those fall in line with what Deion Sanders outlined? Let's take a look at how I'm going to rank the most likely destinations for Shedeur Sanders to end up in based on what Deion said in that interview. The number 1 spot to me, it's pretty obvious, and that's the Tennessee Titans. This centers around the history of both Carthon and Callahan. Carthon comes from San Francisco, and there may not be an organization in football that has done a better job supporting a young quarterback than what San Francisco has done through the draft, through coaching and scheme and personnel. They've done so much good work to surround Brock Purdy to really elevate him to the point where I would actually say that if Purdy was not in San Francisco, I could probably come up with maybe only 3 or 4 teams where he would be having this much success with. And it all stems from that support system. And that's what Deion wants his son to be around. And Carthon has proven that he could be a part of an organization that does that. Callahan has worked with some of the best young quarterbacks in football. Stafford and Burrow, the fact that he has been a part of those guys' progressions and the maturation in the league, that's someone that I would want my son playing for if I was in that position. And the cherry on the top there is his father, Bill Callahan, who is a Hall of Fame caliber offensive line coach. He's constructing and engineering that protection up front. At the very least, Shedeur will not be playing behind a poor offensive line, and that's the first time in a few years we could be saying that. So Tennessee is a team that I think really is set up well for Shedeur Sanders. The number 2 spot are the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, I put a little asterisk on this because I think that Shedeur Sanders ends up in Las Vegas if the head coach position is filled with someone that Deion agrees with. And the way that Deion works, I wouldn't be at all surprised to say that he's actually going to have a say in who that organization drafts, especially if that team has any sort of verbal commitment to drafting Shedeur at the top of the 2025 NFL draft. But branding opportunities and life beyond the gridiron will undoubtedly factor into this decision. The town is as good as any for marketing opportunities. And Telesco, who's now running the front office, he understands how to at least construct a solid roster that can support a quarterback. I do think he struck out on head coach selection, and that's where and maybe even Deion can come in and help out a little bit. But he is a good general manager. He does know how to draft, and he does know how to sign good veteran players that can help protect Shedeur Sanders. Moving on to the next possible destination for Shedeur Sanders, and that are the New York Giants. There have not been many, if any, franchises further down the ladder than the Giants since Eli Manning retired. There are not many, if any, cities that are harder on teams that lose and the players that are on those teams than New York. This would be a roll of the dice for Deion to pick New York and really help Shedeur kind of make his way to that city. But Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll, they have their backs up against the wall. And the one thing that could save both of their jobs is A, to get a new quarterback in, and B, put every resource they have into supporting him. Offensive line, playmakers, a new offensive coordinator, quarterbacks coach, and the success that the Giants did have with that big name, the son of a legend, Eli Manning, son of Archie, and brother to Peyton, they handled that at a really high level because as much as Eli had success in New York, it was a very bumpy road. He did win 2 Super Bowls and 8 MVPs, and now he's a legend in the town, but it was a bumpy ride. And the fact this organization got through all of that should be a sign to Deion that this ownership, this GM, and this head coach, they have the trifecta. They parlayed that. They can put all their experience together and parlay the fact that they've all developed a young quarterback. They know how to do it, and they get to pick their own guy. Nobody's going to get forced onto them the way Daniel Jones did. The last 2 spots I think are kind of non-factors, but I do want to talk about them. Carolina is owned by David Tepper, and this is a guy that wants attention. He's like a Wall Street hedge fund trader. This is what these guys do. They're constantly in and out. They're very emotional. They're back and forth, up and down, left to right. He's constantly changing up the front office and the head coaches, but he wants a lot of attention. He's kind of like a JV version of Jerry Jones in terms of how much attention he wants. And this is the kind of move that gets a lot of eyes on this city. And I do think it's something that he would do to kind of help turn this organization around and make them more in the limelight than what they are. The question is, does this head coaching staff, does Dave Canales believe in Bryce Young? He was not drafted by this regime, but he is starting to turn things around. And to restart that quarterback clock and put 2 resources into the same position while there's holes all over the roster, I don't know if it would happen, but Canales has worked with quality quarterbacks. Baker Mayfield and Russell Wilson, as passers, there are a lot of similarities to what Shedeur brings to the table. So that this is a name that I do think could kind of sneak their way into it if they're even in the quarterback market. The New Orleans Saints are last on this list. I cannot see an environment in any situation, unless it's head coach related only, that New Orleans looks like a destination for Shedeur Sanders in terms of where Deion wants him to play. They don't have a head coach. They've never drafted a quarterback in the first round. The GM has never drafted quarterbacks at a high level to start on this roster. The one thing he does have in his back pocket is he did pick Sean Payton as a head coach, and he did engineer a really supportive roster for the quarterback over a decade with Drew Brees. So that's one feather in their cap. With the salary cap issues and the holes in the coaching staff, and the roster isn't very good, I don't think New Orleans is really going to be in play. So those are the teams where, as of right now, if I had to say Shedeur Sanders is going to be a top 10 pick, those are the candidates. And I would rank them, as I just said, Tennessee, Las Vegas, and New York. Those are the 3 destinations where I could see him, Deion, really signing off on in terms of his NFL future. So that's it, guys. Thanks for listening, and let me know what you think in the comments.